Hi everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave, where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and today we are going to revisit the most recent Artful subscription box, which obviously is my personal favourite because it's coloured pencils. In the interim since the last video, I have ordered the upgrade, so there are extra pencils, and I have to say I was a wee bit confused when I actually received it and opened the box. Oh, pencils. Oh, they're so dinky. Landscapes, these are the ones I'm interested in. This colour's called Grass Stains, oh lordy. Okay, now what are these? Oh, these are the tropical colours, so these are really bright colours. More greens. Oh, these are quite pretty together. Another orange, really? Do we need another orange? So the first thing I need to do to get things right in my mind is put the pencils together in a sensible order. So I've got the original set here that came in the actual subscription box, and I've got the two sets. One of which is supposed to be tropical colours, I think they call it. Yep, tropical, which is these ones here. So lots of nice bright colours, and also they've called this landscapes. And I don't know how I feel about some of these. We seem to have a lot of bright colours. Now the same thing happened with the watercolour set as well. The actual paint choices were very vibrant and there was very little in the way of muted tones, earth tones, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to rearrange these so that they make a little bit of sense in my head, and then we can go from there. And straight away, the first thing I notice is there's duplicate pencils. Well, I say pencils, one so far. This being the original set, we've got an extra white pencil. Not particularly happy about that. Was expecting more colours, so let's just see how this goes. Alright, so that's them sorted into a sort of loose colour order. There is a duplicate black and a duplicate white pencil. Out of all the pencils in a set, black is probably the one that we would least need a duplicate of. Black is not a colour I personally would use on a regular basis because it's too harsh. There's nothing particularly wrong with it. I'm a little bit disappointed that there aren't any more greys. We do have a better selection of these earthy brown tones here, sort of reds and ochres, which is quite nice. But other than that, I'm just not entirely sure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to swatch all these out so that we've got a full swatch and a full set, and I'm going to mark the ones that have come from the new boxes so that we can see what it's actually brought to the set. It's all very well them sitting out like this, but we've established that the barrel colour doesn't always match the core colour, so it's quite important that we do this. Alright, so that is every pencil swatched out now. So the first observations are, first of all, because we've got a duplicate black and white, there isn't actually a full range of 60 pencils here, it's only 58. And that leads me nicely on to my next point. There is quite a nice variety of colours, and I'm welcoming some of the additional pencils, but for a set of 58 pencils, there's a lot of inclusions here that just don't need to be here. I find that the colour choices that they've made for this, what I would call a starter range, because this is smaller than half a set of the polychromos. And I'm going to explain what I mean here. There's colours, now for example, this brown here, this has come in the landscape pack. It is practically identical to a pencil that was already available in the original set, and this is a complete waste. There's not even an incremental difference between these two colours. It is almost the same pencil. So they've included things like that. They've also given us another sort of pinky red colour, which we already had a number of before we got to the upgrade box. So I feel like there's a lot of wasted opportunities there with some of the pencils. I have welcomed the additional blues. We have quite a few here. that are much, much better. But again, they just seem to have made really strange choices. They've included this colour here, and it's so close to next door. Now, the difference between these two pencils, I would expect to see that in an expansion set if you're moving up towards maybe 72 or even towards 100 pencils. Something like this is perfect, because you've got, that's the whole point of having that many pencils. You've got variety without having to layer or mix your own pencils to make a new colour. But when you've got such a small set of pencils at 58, these choices are a waste. And if I just zoom out and if you look at the big picture again, you can see there's very little in the way of muted shades. Everything's very bright and very vibrant. That suits some types of artists, but not necessarily others. And especially down in the browns here, for me, that's a bit, you know, meh. I would have liked to have seen more browns. What I feel this set is lacking now that we've got 58 colours, there are very limited colours in terms of beiges and biscuit colours, you know, so that like the sort of paler browns and also into the sort of more fleshy tones, you know, that kind of spectrum, we're sorely lacking. So we've had an addition of one pale skin tone pencil, but there's no there's no beige or like putty colours, and also as well we're sorely lacking in the grey department as well. They haven't given us any additional greys. You've literally got a warm grey and a cool grey, and that's it. And I feel that some of these other colour choices where the pencil colour is so similar to what we've got already. Now, if you remember, if you watched the unboxing video, we talked about that anyway in this sort of mid yellowy orange. The same thing was happening there, and they seem to have done it again. So in all honesty, I don't know if these upgrade boxes are worth it. For me, I'm really honestly not sure. But the thing is, these are really good quality pencils. They're nice pencils to use, and the fact that we have a nice pencil that is an oil-based pencil is even better, because there's far fewer ranges of oil-based pencils on the market than wax-based pencils. I did get in touch with Artful as well regarding the situation with the questions we asked the first time round. These do have UV ratings, and they are available on the website, which I'll link down in the description. But these pencils will also be available open stock. Rather than buying the upgrade boxes, unless your art style is very vibrant or you're a colourist that likes to use really bright colours, I would not buy the upgrade boxes, but I would go and buy individual pencils open stock to fill in some of these gaps. For the likes of the greens here, it's really nice to see this chartreuse colour be introduced, and also I think they call this one moss, but it's a really nice midway between yellow and green. And it's very different to this one here. That's the kind of addition from an upgrade box of pencils that you would want, especially if you do tend to colour a lot of foliage, like me, or anything even remotely connected with nature. It's really nice to have that kind of colour. The other one that mildly infuriated me as well is this one here. I think it's supposed to be touted as like a light yellow-green. It's yellow, and it is almost identical to what's going up in here. But again, so these pencils, they're so close together. It's pointless. There's actually no need for it. Very mixed feelings about this. Nice to have more pencils. As I say, these pencils are lovely to use. I really, really like them. I just find that their colour choices are really, really odd. That aside, I still think these are great pencils, and I do hope that Artful extend their colour range and fill in some of these gaps for us, particularly for those of us that prefer or tend to use more muted colours and more earth tones. That would be something that would be really nice to see. Now, some of you may think I'm being overly critical and overly harsh here with this analysis, especially including these upgrade pencils, but the reality of it is that these are really expensive pencils. You know, these are up there with your Polychromos and your Prismacolors and, you know, the sort of top-end pencils. So in order for people to want to use these and not use a safe bet like a Polychromos pencil, and I use that example because it's an oil-based pencil as well, there has to be a standard, and I don't feel that people are going to want to take the risk and try these pencils if there's gaps in the colour scheme, because why bother spending that money on these pencils when they can go to a tried and tested, reliable brand? Obviously, coloured pencils especially, is just like any other medium. It is down to personal preference, and some people will buy these just because they like them, but I just feel that the Artful have sold themselves a bit short here with their starter collection. Okay, so now we've talked about that, let's actually do some art. The other thing that's kind of bugging me now as well is I'm going to have to find a pencil case. I've got loads of pencil cases, but I'll need to find one that's got a smaller amount of slots, because 58 is a really odd number. I also, in going through those there as well, I had a bit of a breakage problem with my orange pop. Yeah, it took a bit of a beating. This doesn't really concern me now, knowing that I can buy these open stock. That takes that sort of stressor off, and sometimes this just happens with pencils. These are quite soft pencils, so they will be more prone to breakages, and that is no reflection on the actual build quality of the pencil. All it takes for you is to drop that pencil on your tabletop from even a couple of inches up, and that can cause problems in the core as well. So the fact that you've got the open stock option is excellent, and that's made me really, really happy, because that's one of the main things for me if I decide whether I'm going to continue to use a pencil brand or not. And I think in this set, I suspect it may be this one here, and I wanted to pick this out specifically just because I am absolutely in love with Tree Frog, which is this colour here. It is the most delicate, lovely pale green, and it's a really nice, unique colour. And just by adding a little bit of grey or even another colour, you could really mute that down into a lovely, delicate sage colour. Despite just moaning about the fact that they've picked all these colours and I don't agree with some of the colour choices, I think this is an excellent addition, Tree Frog. I'm in love with some of the names as well, and I think that they're really, really brave and obviously feeling humorous the day they decided to call this pencil Sediment. Unfortunately, so this is one of these ones here, the two browns that we don't actually need, but okay, get like extra brownie points for giving it a funny name. What I have decided to do is to take one of the tutorials in the magazine and sort of level it up's probably the best phrase I would use. So that is what we're going to do today. I wanted to use a simple tutorial because I want this to be accessible to everyone, and we can see here that we've got this really, really nice simple design of the daisy chain. So we're going to start off with this, and then we are going to build on it a little bit and just make it a little bit funkier. So I'll refer back to this periodically, but I'm just going to pop it off to the side here because I've got all these pencils laid out. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to sketch out our flower. So naturally we're going to use the pencils that came supplied in the Artful box. This is a great little tutorial for those of you that are just starting out with coloured pencil, or if you're a newer artist, because it does, the tutorial actually teaches you a little bit about shading but also layering up colours as well. So it's an excellent place to start without feeling really overwhelmed. And because we're talking about organic shapes here, it doesn't need to be precise, so you've got a little bit of room for manoeuvre here. So the first thing that I want to do is sketch out roughly what we've got in the tutorial, and the best thing to do, they've actually got a picture here in this first image on the right hand page of the shape of the flower. And what they've done is they have used a light table here, or a light pad, you can see it in behind, and they've actually traced the image onto another sheet of paper. They've used the colour pencils to outline the image, but using the colours that each part's going to be. So this stem has been outlined with the pine green, and then they're blending in other colours as well. So that in itself is quite an interesting technique. I'm not going to start messing about with light pads and things here because I don't need to. If our eraser is what it says it is, we should be able to erase our graphite lines to a very, very pale stage, so that you don't actually see them when you put your coloured pencil on top without muddying it up. And for that reason, I'm going to use the 6H pencil, which is a really hard pencil. So the main part here is that there's this one big stem that runs more or less up through. So that's a really good starting point. That's a really good anchor point. And I'm just going to pencil that in very, very lightly. Now, even if you are pressing a little bit harder, your lines are still going to be quite faint because this is a 6H pencil. Do not be tempted to press harder, because what it'll do is it'll indent the paper. And then when you come to erase the lines and use your coloured pencil, you will see that indent and it'll stand out in like a bright white because you've pushed the tooth of the paper down. So we don't want to do that. Keep a nice light hand, but that's what this pencil is for. Now at the top here, we've got quite an interesting wee trumpet shape. So let's just get this basic sketch down here. Now, if you are a bit more confident, you have the benefit of when it actually comes to using the coloured pencil. If you decide you don't like one of your shapes that you've put down, you can augment it just in the coloured pencil. So on the right hand side here, there's 3 branches that come off, and then we've got a wee branch that pops off here. So I'm trying to be aware of my paper size here. I'm trying to use as much of the paper as possible because this is a simple image. If you make it quite small, it looks kind of lost on a big sheet of white paper like this. And this is just the Artful paper that I'm using. It's the pad that came in the subscription box, so it is A4. I know you guys won't be able to see much of this because it's very, very faint, but that's obviously to facilitate our coloured pencil use. Okay, so that's the basic flower shape. That didn't take us long. But what I would like to do is I would like you to add like a flower pot at the bottom here. We've got this little chunk of space at the bottom, which obviously I've left deliberately. It would be quite nice to put in a wee, even just a sort of traditional, you know, terracotta, you know, like a starter planter pot, and that will give us the opportunity to put some more texture into the picture. Maybe it's one of the maybe it's like a little weeny dinky. You know, you get the little tiny plant pots that are like this big, or you get the like in the growing kits for kids. Maybe it's one of them. I kind of like that idea. Okay, so we can use our Artful eraser here. If we use our Artful eraser, I have a feeling these lines may disappear completely. So I'm just going to go very lightly and I'm going to use a circular motion. Normally what I would do is use a kneaded eraser, because with a kneaded eraser you can press down, so you're just lifting off rather than rubbing away. And what it does is it seems to take away most of the graphite. But you've still got enough to work with. But the key to doing this, if you don't have a light pad, is to get these graphite lines as light as possible. And also the harder graphite pencil you can use, the better, because then there's less likely that the graphite will smudge underneath. Because one of the things that's appealing about this particular image is the aesthetic. It's very clean. And obviously the more graphite you have, the greyer and muddier that gets. So this step's quite important. I like this tutorial as well because they've actually talked about the pencils, the specific colours that they've used. And they have, so they've started with the stem in the middle, and this is the longest one. So this is the one that runs all the way up through here. And they've used pine green and blend it with turquoise, so that helps to create a highlight. So let's get down to business here. So I'm just sticking a light layer of this turquoise down on the stem. And I'm going to take this all the way down to the bottom. And at this stage, this is coloured pencil. This does not have to be tidy at this stage. Do not worry your little self about that if you think it looks a bit ropey or a bit scratchy. It's absolutely fine. This is just what happens. This is the starting point. So I can see what they've done is they've blended the darker colour on one side, and they've done that to create a light source, so the lighter side is on this side. So naturally then when I take the pine green, I'm going to start blending that in from the left hand side. So I'm going to a circular motion here, and I'm just going to start at the stem at the top here, where that's this sort of it's like almost like a cone shape at the top here. And I'm going to get that pine green down and start to bring it down. Now just in this first section, because I've not done a lot with these coloured pencils, I kind of want to get to know them a little bit. So if I zoom in a bit further and bring this round so that you can see what I'm doing. Because we're essentially here, this is an alien supply and it's alien paper as well. So this first little part here, I'm just doing a bit of discovery, and I'm going back with the turquoise pencil, which is that lighter colour. I'm just going to see how these blend together in this particular instance. So I can see that starting to blend in a little bit. Just make that nice and rich. And when I'm satisfied with this blend, then I'll start working my way down and just using the same technique. So you can see instantly now that I know what I'm doing, I'm actually working dark to light. I've gone back to the, I've gone to the pine green pencil, and then I'm working in the turquoise. So that shows me that I'm comfortable, because by default, unless there's a particular reason, I tend to favour dark to light rather than the other way around. Okay, so we've got our first stem here, and you can see that's popping out beautifully from the paper. Now when I'm talking about levelling up, I'm talking about subtle differences, subtle things that you can do just to add a wee bit more. It's nothing complicated, because we don't want complicated things, because art's supposed to be fun. So I'm going to grab one of the pencils from the upgrade, which is the Ivy pencil, and I'm just going to take the tip off it. With my Artful sharpener, I hasten to add. Quite like this wee sharpener, it's been quite good so far. So a really simple thing we can do is we just want to add a little bit more depth to the shadow side, which is our left hand side. So the likes of in here, if the light's coming from this side, then the darker part's going to be on this left hand side. And literally pressing quite hard, but just a couple of lines there, it's almost like an accent. And you can blend it out a little bit if you want, if you don't like the harsh lines. But also in this curve here, because it's bending this way, I would imagine that in here could possibly be a bit darker as well. And then when we get down to the bottom of this stem, because it's going into the pot as well, really work in some of this ivy. There we go. Doesn't look like much, but when you start doing this to all aspects of it, that's just going to make that little bit of difference. But also this is me making it my own as well. Okay, creating the leaves, they lay down a base colour first, and then colour half of it with a darker shade, creates a nice contrast between the two sides of the leaf, and then blend it slightly with a lighter colour. So no specification on what colours to use for this, and this is where we can start to play about with the colours that we've got. So you can see on this lower leaf here, I've done a bit more blending, but I've left a much paler edge there, and again that's just to catch the highlight, you know, for the light source. So you can tweak that and you can play about with it, and you know, you can kind of mess about a little bit, see what works, because you've got quite a few leaves on this particular image that you can work with and try out and experiment different things. So the next step is step 4, and it says, I continue this way experimenting with the different shades of blue as I go. What does ultramarine look like with emerald on top? How about pine green and azure? Have fun with different combinations. So that's what we're going to do for the rest of the leaves now. So just by introducing a third colour here, this has let me get a very nice smooth transition. Now that doesn't fit the aesthetic of the drawing in the tutorial, but this is just another way that you can augment slightly. So you can see that the split down this particular leaf is much softer, and I've basically used the Kingfisher just as an accent colour, as like a shading colour, but I've brought it right down into the bottom here, again just to make it a little bit more interesting. And I really like the combination of these three colours. So that's Tree Frog, Waterfall and Kingfisher. That's quite a lovely set of colours, and that's come out beautifully. These pencils are blending together beautifully as well. There's a surprise, Gem enjoying herself with coloured pencils. You would never have guessed. So we're going to go grassy green and pine green for this last stalk here. Really like that colour combination together. Okay, so that's all our leaves and stems done now. Had a bit of fun with that. We'll come back and add some finishing touches later, but what I want to do now is work on some of the other aspects here. So we've got these sort of orange circles, for want of a better, I don't know what they're supposed to be, but what we want to do is want to pick a light orangish yellow, of which we have lots of choice. So I'm going to go for sand here and then pick a darker colour. So I'm going to go for my poor little orange pop here that's a little bit short. And basically you just want to get this base colour down first. And then again, thinking about that light source coming in this way, we want the darker colour to be on this left hand side. So following the theme of what we've already done with some of these other areas. And if we keep this in sort of like a C shape, it gives that idea that there's a curvature on this particular part of the flower. And we can leave a lighter patch here, like a highlight, and we can build it up, and the more layers of pencil you can get down, the more vibrant this is going to become. And then if we want, again, this addition of a third pencil just to give it, let's go postbox red, why not? And we want to keep this to an absolute minimum, so perhaps just on this very outside edge here. There we go. So you can see the difference that's made, and it really highlights that fact that there's a light source. This is possibly quite a shiny little bud as well. There seems to be a combination of one of these yellowish colours, so I'm going to stick with sand, but a pink colour over the top of it. So I think I'm going to go with either Cardinal. I think Fairy was one of the ones that was quite pink. So we've got the centre of this daisy type flower. What I'm going to do though is, I suppose I better show you the book here. It's very, very subtle, but you can see the yellowish colour underneath there, and there's much more of the pink down at the bottom here. So all I'm going to do with this is just make it a bit more pronounced, but I'm going to change the side again, just going with that light source idea. And I'm going to take that yellow straight over the top of it and blend it a wee bit. And I've unintentionally, there's a tiny little white bit of paper there, so I'm just going to leave that and have that as like the highlighted area. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Now, things like this you can blend out with a white pencil if you want a lighter, brighter feel to it, but I feel this is quite cheery anyway. And it's not something that I do very often, but the white pencil is very good in this set as well, so it will change the colour. Okay, so the last step in the tutorial now, it says, finally I create the flower petals by going over their lines with azure and amethyst. So we're going to use those two pencils, if we can find them. I've got pencils everywhere. So for this, because it's an outline, we want a nice pointy point, so make sure you've got a good sharp point on your pencil. Pressing fairly hard here as well, just to get that nice crisp line. And then we'll do the same with the other pencil. And then we've got our big petals down here. So now I'm going to go down to the terracotta pot, and I want to try and keep some of the aesthetic here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a terracotta type colour. Redwood is the one that we want. I'm going to do the rim of the pot first, all the way over the rim. And just bring a single line round the back here. So this is kind of tying in with that aesthetic of the petals here. And then this front part, I'm going to start deepening the colour on one side, because this is the side that's going to get the least light, as previously discussed. Maybe just bring that halfway. And then I can grab this chestnut colour and use that as a shadow colour. Now we're going to do the same with the bottom part of the pot as well. However, there is going to be a shadow here, because this is like a lip. So I'm actually going to take that darker pencil and run it all the way along here. And then we can just start building up the colour too. We want to blend in with this shadow colour at the top as well, so we can do a bit more work on that as we go along. Okay, so I'm going to use Bear Cub. And rather than just colouring this in, I'm going to add a little bit of texture. So I'm going to use tiny little circles, as almost as if there's pebbles in there. And I'm going to vary my pressure as I go. And then I'm going to take a yellow colour, so I think I'll stick with the sand colour. I'm just going to go straight over the top of that. Okay, this is looking quite cheery, I have to say, and I'm enjoying myself very much here. I've just got a couple of graphite lines I want to take away around these petals. So I want a shadow colour just to ground my pot here, and rather than going for grey or black, because that's boring, I'm going to pick out a Midnight, which is a sort of indigo type colour. And again, the light source is coming this way, so we're going to have the cast shadow is going to be here, and it's going to be in a shadow this way. Now you don't need to be particularly scientific about it, but if you just put a blob of colour down underneath, then it instantly grounds your object. So it's not just, you know, floating about on the page kind of thing. But we want the shadow going in this direction, something like that. And the closer to the pot it is, the heavier the shadow is going to be. So if we just add in some more layers here. Yeah, so there, so you can see where the light's coming from now. Okay, the last thing I want to do, just to make this, you know, just take it that little step further, because that's what I promised. This is lovely. Like, I really like the composition of this, and it's a very cheery picture, which makes me happy. I would like to just add in some more texture to these flowers here. And again, it just, not that it's not interesting to begin with, it really is interesting. But I think we could just do a little bit more with this. So first things first, I'm going to grab the bottle green, and I've got a nice sharp point on this here. And I'm just going to add some veins in on some of these leaves, not all of them, but on these sort of greenish ones, because you don't want to take away from the sort of the gentle simplicity of this picture either. And for the sort of bluish and purpley ones here, I'm going to use the Midnight, so you can use your own discretion there. And on these petals, the outline colour that I've used, I'm going to use this for a bit of shading. So I've got the amethyst for these little dinky petals up the top here, and I'm just going with my light source. So again, darken at the bottom. Now very, very lightly here. I just want there to be a suggestion that this colour lives. And if any of you have ever seen daisies in the grass, sometimes they've got little pink bits on them, and it's very, very delicate. I think that's the kind of idea. So you can still clearly see the outline, and you've still got the impact of that outline, but there's just the little bit of extra colour in there. And I'll grab the, the azure pencil, and I'm going to do the same here. So more colour in at the bottom, and then just bring it part way up. Now for these ones here, I feel like this is just such a big part of the picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a gradient from the bottom of the petal up. So where it's in at the base there, I'm actually going to make that really concentrated. And as I come towards the edge, I'm just going to fade the pencil out. So all I'm doing is lightening my pressure. And maybe let the colour fade out about halfway up. So you've still got that nice impact of the outline that was originally intended. If you're new to coloured pencils, a one pencil gradient like this is a great way to learn about shading. And it's especially helpful if you're practicing light sources. So if that's something that you are new to, I do have a video in my drawing tips, no, colouring tips for beginners series, which I'll link in the description, and I'll stick that particular video in the end card. But there's a whole series of videos there for people that are just starting out with coloured pencil. And using one pencil as a gradient like this is a really good way to introduce impact into your colouring or your artwork without having to, you know, use any sort of advanced techniques. And it teaches you really good pressure control as well, which is really, really important when you're using coloured pencil. So also by doing this as well, what I'm doing is I'm creating contrast in between the petals. So you can see the gaps in between there, the white gaps, they kind of pop out as well, which is a really nice touch and actually brings you, you know, makes the flower stand out more because you've got these really heavy outlines that we did earlier. Marvellous. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do now is take the Midnight pencil, and I just want to add in some shadows. There's a few places where I think we could do with some shadows, and the first one is here. Now I'm using this very, very lightly. Again, more like an accent. I'm not actually trying to change the colour of what I'm doing. I feel in some of these wee nooks and crannies here, like a little line of indigo, or midnight in this case, it just isn't going to hurt anybody. Obviously, if you've got very light coloured pencils, indigo might not be the best choice. You know, if you're using like really pastel shades, a lighter colour would probably be better. And maybe where this stock's actually going into our plant pot as well, our very traditional plant pot. And I can also crisp up some edges here with this same pencil. And literally just by running it down the side and along in that little gap there as well that we're working on. That bit more contrast. And there we go. So that is my take on the Artful tutorial. So I can show you next to the original now. If I put them side, we'll turn it slightly. So you can see I've still captured the basic aesthetic, but in augmenting and changing a few things, I've kind of lost some of that aesthetic at the same time, because this is a very crisp, clean and simple drawing. But you can see it doesn't take much in the way of technique to change things, to make them your own, but also just to push the boat out a little bit and try a little bit more. Even the simple addition of a plant pot with a little bit of shading on it changes the picture quite substantially. And it's really pretty. I'm really happy with it. And this has been very relaxing and very nice. So I hope you've learned a little bit more about coloured pencil today, and that you've enjoyed this video and enjoyed watching me create this. So thank you very much for watching. I would love to hear all your opinions on the tutorial itself, and also on these pencils too, as well as what you think of our little plant here. So thanks for coming to hang out, guys. Really appreciate it. And I will see you back in the cave on Thursday for another video. So have a great day, everyone. Bye for now.